for me in my lifetime of 28 years, I think I've been navigating it every day. I've been navigating setbacks, shutdowns, the country saying you're not welcome.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize the conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Today's episode is really special because it is my first podcast guest. Her name is Nartarsha Bamblett, and we are going deep in the conversation around Aboriginal cultural awareness, truth-telling, and diving into some of the conversations that have been really hard to talk about, but also misunderstood. Nartarsha Bamblett, known as Queen Acknowledgment, is a First Nations woman living on Narram country in Melbourne. Her acknowledgements extend beyond just empty words that is too often tokenized and has amplified its true meaning. Incorporating dance, song, and soul, they serve as a true representation of Indigenous culture, country, and ancestry. Beyond the acknowledgements, she is a fierce and authentic speaker, presenter, activist, and educator who has developed workshops and healing programs aimed at connecting to mind, body, and soul through culture, history, and country. I loved recording this conversation, and I know you're going to love Nartarsha and this conversation that we're going to have. And if you are somebody who is very much ignited by matters to do with justice, human justice, social justice, anti-racism, this conversation is going to ignite you even further. Take a listen. Hey there, Nartarsha. I am so blessed and happy and excited to have you on the podcast. You are my very first guest. And I think it is so fitting, so appropriate, given what we will be discussing today. But I just want to give you a big, warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It feels delightful to be here and to be a part of this in what you're able to produce for people.
We're going to dive right in, and I want to ask the question of your name. So, Queen Acknowledgement, where did this come from? Was it something that people started referring to you as, or was it something you're like, I'm going to crown myself and call myself this because I do such a good job of what I do? How did the name come about?
I love this question. For me, it had started when I really started to heal myself and to go on the journey of growth and self-development. And I started to see myself differently. And there was a time where people had seen something in me that I didn't yet see, that being from the Queen herself, Erica Kramer, the Queen of Confidence. I was really being mentored from her in her program, and she was just like, isn't this what you do? Isn't this who you are? And I sat with it for a long time in what am I representing? And there was lots of women who were coming to me and just loving the energy of this new version of me that I was stepping into, that was presenting to the world. And we just had conversations. I was referring to women as queen. And
Mm.
then I thought, well, if the women in my life are queens, that means that I should be a queen too. And what I was doing was Acknowledgments of Country, and the two just married, and it stuck.
I love that. And even the term queen, it is very much based on Black people. We refer to each other as queens and we refer to our men as kings. It is
Mm,
very much tied to the kingdoms we once, were part of. It's very tribal. And so how we refer to one another, it's very much elevating and
yeah,
speaking to their highest self and calling ourselves queens and kings because we are part of a kingdom. We had kingdoms, and that was how things were in the past. And so it's beautiful to see you bring out this name in this way. Now, for those who are listening or watching, Tash, who may not know what an acknowledgement of country is, who are not Australian based, please give us a definition of what that is. But I'd
mm,
also love you to dive a little bit deeper and tell us what the difference is between an acknowledgement of country and a welcome to country.
yeah. So for First Nations people here in Australia, we have two really strong ceremonies that take place. A Welcome to Country is presented from an elder. We call them TOs, which stands for traditional owner, and they are custodians of the land on which a gathering is taking place. And an elder of that nation, of that tribal group, of that language and origin would, in their life, have been passed this role and responsibility to take this on, to give to the wider nation the understanding of where a person is, the importance of country, acknowledging the connection of First Nations people and the land as the oldest living continuous culture on this planet, and how people, when they come with purpose and to care for this land as First Nations people have. And an acknowledgement holds the essence of that, but an acknowledgement of country is for everyone. So anyone of any color, race, origin, whether you're born here or you've come here, you have the power to acknowledge the place of where you are, the people, the culture, the country. And an acknowledgement of country to me is about acknowledging the past, present, and future in the very moment. And it's just bringing a deep presence and understanding to bring yourself, your culture, the country, and the community
Mm.
in the one place, in the one moment together. And that's what I aim to bring when I present an acknowledgement of country for people.
Mm. It's so beautiful, this tradition, this way of showing and paying respect. And the fact that, it is the oldest continuing culture, that is something that a lot of people forget.
Mm.
And I think it's so important to center that. What I have found really interesting since the pandemic hit, since 2020, there's been such an amplification, Tash, of acknowledgement of country here in Australia. We used to do it when I worked in corporate, we used to do it before meetings and so on. But it felt very much like it was still something we were unfamiliar with. We were doing it and trying to make it part of how the culture of the office. But now, since the pandemic, I've seen a shift. I've seen this happen. I'm in the middle of a department store like Big W. An announcement comes up from the manager of marketing saying what country we are on and honoring the traditional owners. I have had it on airplanes when we're about to land, the country we're getting into. There's just been so much amplification. What do you think brought that about?
The world and this nation had to stop and look at itself. And there was a deep presence that was brought to every single person and in every single home. And to me, this wasn't something new. As you said, the oldest living continuous culture on the planet. Not does only the nation may forget that, but I think us as a First Nations people have sometimes forgot it. And it was just a reminder. It was a reminder that being still and allowing ourselves to sit with ourselves and our families, it was an ancient practice. And there was hardships that were felt collectively, and the shift was it's that we had nowhere to hide anymore, and the world was talking about it. And I think in those times we've evolved as humans to be able to better communicate what's going on, what's been going on, and to look at what's happening and has happened. And I believe that's the shift. Acknowledgement, right?
100%. And still continuing on that notion of acknowledgement, I want to bring in the conversation around truth telling. As somebody who has lived here and called Australia home for close to 24 years now, Tash, one thing that has always been missing is the education around the history of Australia. It is something that is very obvious that we don't know the true history of how Australia came to be. It's something that has either been deliberately left out or something that has been glossed over. People don't want to talk about it or dwell around it. And in the work that I do, racial equity, anti-racism work, working with a lot of online business owners, particularly those based here in Australia, what comes up for them is the disservice they have received from the education system, that they went to school from when they were little kids to growing up and becoming adults and not understanding the true history. So there's a lot that's been hidden from white Australians that hasn't really spoken about that painful history. And so as somebody who does this work, educates in this area, what do you have to say about that injustice, that disservice that is happening and continues to, that we're not able to reflect on the true history of Australia?
I can feel it. I can feel the complexities that are held from a society around it. They say, be careful what you ask for, because the answer the answer that you'll get, yeah, there is truth to it, and sometimes the truth can be painful to hear. And what I firstly want to say in acknowledging the disservice that's taken place over history, over 200, over 230 years, is, this is what I say in my work to people who show up. Firstly, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you know what you know and you don't what you don't. But there is a but, and that is that it's your responsibility now. You're responsible for the things that you do not know, the blind spots, the gaps. We've heard closing the gap for a long time. My question is to those who, want to refer to that is, are we referring to the stats of what closing the gap looks at? Or is the gap the silence that we hold in acknowledging what's happened and is happening, and the conversations that aren't being had? And the truth telling, I believe, is the way we reconcile, is the way we move together and build a stronger future. Because then, within the truth, we give ourselves an equal playing field, because it allows people that have been hurt, and speaking of First Nations people as a collective, it allows those pains to be seen. It allows the disconnections, the dispossessions, the suppression and oppression of a peoples to be heard and seen. And in that place, not only can First Nations people heal, but so can the rest of the nation. Because there lies forgiveness, there lies compassion and understanding. And in the truth, it's not just for those to hear the truth, but it's also for those to speak their truth. And we have to meet. There has to be a meeting. And in this instance, Black and white, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, we have to meet. And that requires us individually and collectively to show up for ourselves and the gaps that lie here. And what is beyond the gap? It's us together.
What is beyond the gap? It is us together. Now, taking us a few steps back to a few months ago, back in 2023, October, when we had the Voice to Parliament. And as somebody who was very much pro the Yes campaign, and when you're pro something, the things that come through your feed on your social media are very much pro that. And so for me, whilst I was hearing a lot of the other side, there was still a bit of me that was surely this will be a yes. Surely what is being asked for here is something so basic that we would all be coming together and saying yes. How are First Nations people, yourself in particular, how have you been able to navigate that post the results?
For me, in my lifetime of 28 years, I think I've been navigating it every day. I've been navigating setbacks, shutdowns, the country saying you're not welcome, echoing the words of Stan Grant, talking about the Australian dream. That's what First Nations people hear with our hearts. the spirit, almost saying that you don't belong. But referring back, we are the oldest living continuous culture that exists, that is spirit, that is connection, that is history, that is strength, wisdom, knowing. And with that comes power. Power to get back up, power to face adversity. And sometimes the darkest times and the most painful come in form of people. They have a face, they have a voice, they have a name, and it can hurt. And I just believe there was a lot of misunderstanding. There was a lot of confusion. Again, this was something that was brought on so quickly. We've been here. We've been waiting. We've been asking. We've been marching. We've been shouting. And who was listening most of the time? It's our own people. So I felt in the process of that time, I felt okay with what was going on, because I knew whatever the result, it wasn't about that. It was about what happens afterwards. And that was my call to action to those in my community, was regardless of the result of which way you vote, for whatever reason, I love you. And will you still be here? Will you still be here? Will you still be advocating passionately for whatever vote it was, as passionate for First Nations people when we need you? Because the referendum was one day. We live every day in the color and the shoes and the journeys and the paths of what it means to be an Aboriginal person in this country. Will the wider nation still be here when it's done? And I've seen humankind. I've seen it in the best, and unfortunately, it's not even the worst. It's just in the hearts and minds of those that are asleep, that are hurting themselves. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for an opportunity, which I believe that was an opportunity for people to come together, to listen deeper. And I just believe that that wasn't the right time. It wasn't supposed to be like that. But how do we as a nation show up when it's done and it's over and the next day comes? It was emotionally taxing, regardless of whether a First Nations person, because that's what it was about, the sentence. I think we missed it. I think the government or the nation had missed that. And First Nations people have their own views and opinions on it. I was there to support all of my people, regardless of the vote. It wasn't about that. It was about how do we stay strong, supported, and connected. And it was emotionally taxing. It was nerve-wracking. I'd felt a lot of anxiety, my own and of others around me. Felt a lot of pressure. And I took a hit for a few days afterwards, and I could see a lot of the people in my community that had too. So I hope that it's an opportunity that we've learnt from, and for us to just do better.
Wholeheartedly agree with everything you've said. And perhaps what has stood out for me, Tash, is what you've said about love. You know, it takes an extra amount of grace to love through this kind of work that you do. Where do you go to fill up? Where do you go to take care of those feelings that sometimes may not always be feelings of love? How do you take care of you so that you're bringing what you feel might be the version of you that allows to move the needle forward? It might be ever so slightly, but at least the generations to come, your children, your children's children, are not beginning where you began, that the needle has been moved ever so slightly.
I'm always called to country. When I feel that I have given and there is no human that can fill a void or something that I long for inside of me, I turn to the country. And to me, and First Nations people, the country is our mother. It is our creator. It's our carer, nurturer, provider, and the country is a part of us. So I go there really to be with myself, to go within, and what lives within is spirit. We all have it, and the spirit knows where to go and what it needs and how to move emotion through the body. And I give myself permission for that to take place. Then I can go and be who I need to be for the people in my life. But in the end of the day, the start of the day, we wake up with ourselves. We go to sleep with ourselves. We are all we have in this life. We are with ourselves 100% of the time. And I choose to show up for myself. And the country is the best place to do that because it's a beautiful reflection of who we are as human beings.
It absolutely is. And what a reminder about the things that ground us. What a reminder about the fact that we are with ourselves 100% of the time. And so how are we caring to that self? Hey there, friend. I'm interrupting this episode to share with you a brand new resource that I've created for you. It is 5 microaggressions commonly made in online coaching spaces. Now, this is a guide explaining to you what to do instead. As an online business owner or a coach, there's no doubt about your commitment and dedication to fostering an inclusive coaching environment. After all, it was your heart and care for others that drove you to do this work in the first place. But there's subtle ways you could be unintentionally causing harm within your spaces through unconscious acts of microaggression. This guide will help you uncover the patterns or behaviors within your space holding that may be affecting the experience of your clients from racially diverse backgrounds, so you can hold more intentionally inclusive and impactful coaching spaces. Head over to anigishuru.com/micro. That's Anigishuru, GICHURU.com, micro, MICRO. I want to shift gears now as we almost wind up. And I want to talk about January 26th. that date is a date that has again brought a lot of division in Australia. When I first came as a international student from Kenya, it was a day of huge celebration. As somebody who did not understand or know the history, it was very much a day where we're going to go see the fireworks in the evening. We're going to celebrate the culture of Australia and embrace it. And over the years, and I must say for me, the awakening began probably around 7 years ago. I was working in human resources and we had an intern who was Aboriginal. I remember telling him, the following day was going to be a public holiday. And I remember telling him, a happy Australia Day. But something in me just felt off. Maybe it
Mm,
was the energy he gave off. He was a very soft-spoken gentleman, very, he's not somebody who would have said something back like that's inappropriate, Annie, or whatever. But it just hit me. It just, in the silence, in the energy that was exchanged. And I remember as soon as I said it, I felt like, I don't think it's right to say that, but I didn't yet know what I know now. And so, given everything that has been happening in the recent years, and for those of you who are listening who are possibly not Australian, January 26 was made a public holiday in 1994 to commemorate the landing of the First Fleet in 1788. It's a day that is referred to as Australia Day, but what does it really signify and mean to our First Nations people is the bigger question here. It is a day that has been now referred to as Invasion Day, Survival Day. What's your take here, Tash? I'd love to hear your thoughts and
yeah.
possibly where we go from here, because it's a lot of awakening. For
Mm,
me, there is no way, there is just no way that that is a day that I can look at as Australia Day.
mm,
Knowing what I know now, and as every year goes by, the knowing sinks deeper and deeper.
mm. You said something that stood out to me, and that was reflecting in my own words, nothing is louder than silence. And to me, growing up, this day, January 26th, has always been a day of mourning and being connected to the nation and people from Kamargunja that had declared this as a day of mourning for our people. It was about gathering, it was about connecting, and it was about healing. It was about honoring those that have come before, that have carried hardship, sacrifice, inflicted traumas on the men, women, and children from the landing of the fleet and colonization and the ripple effects that have taken place from that day. What has been lost, meaning land, language, law, ceremony, customs, traditions, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. We have lost our connection, knowledge, and knowing to these things, of the way we live it. For some people of this country, First Nations people, it still exists, and boy, it's rich and filling, and it makes my heart sing, my spirit dances, knowing that that still exists here and is for us, and experiencing that firsthand for myself, knowing that there's communities, countries, nations in particularly. I've spent lots of time with the young people. We are giving people. We are loving and kind and caring, and we've just always shared from the heart. This country is the heart. The Uluru is the heart of this globe, this place. So that's why people do feel a sense of home and belonging, even if you're from another country. I'm sure that smile, just tells me that that's what it does for people, whether you've been here 20 years or 2 years. And that's the essence of First Nations people. And this day, I've always spent it with my family because that's what makes me feel the strongest in my identity as an Aboriginal woman. That's all I've got. When I was growing up, when I thought of culture, it was my family. We didn't speak language, but the language that we spoke to one another, it made me feel different in a way that it was special, that I could understand the love in the words that we spoke to one another. It made me feel strong and proud. And I remember the time of my life where I was playing for Richmond. We called a training, and this training happened to fall on January 26th. I was sick because this year was the first year that I wouldn't be with my family. Not just not being with my family, but being with people that I knew didn't see this day how I did. I was worried. I was worried about what it would bring up for me, what I would be confronted with. And I know the girls that I played with loved me and I loved them, and we shared a beautiful relationship within the club. And it was just, they didn't know. They didn't know. And they were celebrating, and oh, we're going to have a barbecue with our family and friends, and we're going to go out to the boat house, and oh, like happy Australia Day. And I was just silent. I was quieter than ever. People knew without me saying anything. But at that time of my life, I didn't know what to say. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I had experienced that moment of there is work yet to be done for this nation. There is an innocence of wanting to do the right thing, as I've experienced from that moment on. And people are searching for the answers. And I say to people, I don't have the answers. I just am, and I just be. And in those times, I get to learn and understand how to be with people. And in time of hardship for a collective, because it is a very divided day, I would say the right thing is just to be. Be with what's present. Not one person can fix the depth that is present on that day, but it's just to be with it, it's just to be with each other, to listen, to, and we've been doing this since ancient times. It's to listen, it's to just sit and be and take it easy. And I'm sure everyone in this life has experienced loss, or whether it's in our own families or communities, or we've seen it in others. That's what it feels like. It feels like there has been a loss of life, and that's what that day signifies. Things of our identity that have been lost in the presence of somebody's life day to day, the loss of people, and this is also a reminder that it's not that I don't ever want to speak for people, but it's not that we don't want the nation to celebrate, because I believe there should be celebration on this day. Just as if we lose somebody, we celebrate their life of what was. There is 65,000 plus years to celebrate in the mourning of what has been and what is here, the leaders that are here, the voices that are being shared, the presence, the impact has come from what's been before. Mm-hmm. And that is a blessing. That is beautiful. That is a gift. And I always find it in my heart to celebrate my ancestors, who I am and who I've come from, and the land of what it has given to so many people, our people, Australian people, the world. It's given such opportunity to those for a better life. And I hope that for this day, people can just be with the truth that this history has a dark history, sad, painful, but we have the opportunity to be a part of a better future. And together we get to create that as a nation that we know as Australia.
And so for somebody who's listening, and probably this is the first time they're having a deeper understanding, they hadn't quite understood what January 26 is, or somebody listening or watching who has been stirred up in their heart, there's a conviction happening. What is something that they can do on January 26th to stand in solidarity with First Nations people and to educate their children? Because the next generation needs to be exposed to truth telling. What are some of the things that they can do on January 26th that is different to perhaps what they've done before? I love the story that you've shared there about, the fact that the people you went out, on that particular day didn't understand what January 26 means, and truly that it was a celebration because they didn't know. Now that you have language, now that you're able to possibly, educate, how would you have people support First Nations people?
I would say that there's no excuse for us to not know something. We have access to knowledge at our fingertips. So we have 364 days to look into the history of Australia outside of January 26 and allow that to be what it is for First Nations people and the impact that it holds. and for you to be a part of the impact of what it could mean to First Nations people that are here present in the process of it. January 26th, there's a beautiful festival and gatherings that I'm sure is held across this nation, but in particularly Melbourne, we call it Share the Spirit Festival. That's just one thing, and I believe it's just the essence, sharing the spirit of First Nations people, our ancestors, and allowing the spirit to live on in the present, and to be with that, and to listen, to amplify, and to just show up. Your presence is bigger than you. I stood in the crowd of the march 2022, the presence of people's faces. It will be an image that I will never forget. Don't ever underestimate your presence.
Tash, that is a beautiful place to end this conversation. So Tash, tell us, what are some of the ways in which people can connect with you? And if they want to work with you, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, they can get in touch via social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, going through a beautiful rebranding on what this looks like. So excited to share that. But reach out, Queen Acknowledgments, Nartarsha Bamblett, whether it be for your events to experience an authentic, cultural acknowledgement of country, or whether it be deeper, where we sit and you get to show up for yourself in these conversations that is important for this country and how we get to move together.
Natasha, I appreciate your time so very much. Thank you so much for being here. Everything that you've just shared from the heart. I know this is a conversation that's not easy. It takes a lot for us to sit down and talk about the deep hurts, but I know it's also part of our collective healing. And I am so grateful, and really, really, my heart just feels so full to have this connection with you and to be able to have this conversation. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented from coast to coast.